And all right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tulsiology, the channel where, of course, I talk about Tulsi Gabbard quite a bit, and I tend to have a few special guests on to talk about Tulsi, but other issues maybe related to Tulsi Gabbard, maybe not related necessarily. Today, I've got a first-time guest, somebody who follows me on Twitter. I follow them as well. We tend to retweet each other and agree with each other. And I've been in the comfort food uh, sort of mode lately where I
You're
just,
not the only one.
yeah, I'd like to find some like-minded people to talk to, not contrarians, because I don't know about you, Caz, but I get a little bit irritated. Caz Schoenleber is with me. He's from the state of Georgia. He's a smart guy. He's been on Twitter for a while. And welcome to the show, Caz.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Dave. And it's nice to have an opportunity to come on. It's definitely timely. You kind of spoke to the fact that we've kind of followed each other for a bit. And I know I was just looking back at, really started following you on YouTube, probably going back to the middle of last year or so, it's really following Tulsi Gabbard. And as you said, it was started this journey kind of following her and her really fresh perspective, right? And ultimately, we've kind of crashed into the election today. So anyway, here we are.
Yeah. I think you're a guy who believes in election integrity. I've seen a lot of people, and people are we saw the same stuff when, we saw Democrat candidates start to fall. We said, well, when we got to of course, the preordained, predestined nominee that everybody was afraid would actually get the nomination. And now supposedly and I'm not ready to concede that he's won the presidency. I know the media and Saturday Night Live and everybody in the world, rock stars, everybody is just giddy apparently with excitement that we've elected a neoliberal warmonger to again, I'm in one of those moods.
Sadly.
Yes. But I'm under the impression that we should count every vote legal, as I would like to say. We should count every legal vote, and we should throw out votes that aren't legitimate votes and so forth. So what's your perspective? You're from Georgia. You told me there's some stuff going on there. Obviously, that was another state that was suddenly in play, and then it went, of course, over to Biden. What's your take?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, I think I went to bed on Tuesday night and we were up over 120,000 votes, in the red column. And, each day we saw that whittle down. So, from obviously, with the election on the 3rd, today is now the 8th. And right now we're sitting at, election has still not been called in the state of Georgia, but Democrats are up just at 10,000 votes as the statewide total. Over 5 million ballots cast statewide.
Yeah, that's I the other day I had my friend Charles Anderson on, and we were talking about how when I used to actually work in a call center, and I used to take calls for the Affordable Care Act, believe it or not. And,
okay.
The subsidies that they would offer a lot of times would just so happen would almost equal the dollar amount of the policy. The policy was $1,200. Person would magically get a subsidy of like $1,150, and they'd be on the hook for $50. And,
right.
All that money, by the way, that was coming in for that was basically just a nice little gift to the insurance companies, and will be a gift, I guess, moving forward, because we've heard that the goal of the Biden administration would be to strengthen Obamacare, which I find hysterical. But it seems my analogy here is all around the country, like in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Nevada, all of these states that were kind of questionable and could have went either way, and probably were leaning red at one point pretty heavily. All of a sudden went blue, but just by enough to get them over the mark. And that should raise some red flags.
Well, and that's right, Dave. And it didn't go unreported that there were irregularities in Georgia in that switch or in that turning over that we saw, right? The red mirage, in Georgia, we clearly had some substantiated events. So if I could, I just, kind of wanted to start with Tuesday night and just have a couple clear cited cases that have open litigation on at this point.
Go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate you for giving myself, I'm just a concerned Georgia citizen, and folks that are in my community a chance to talk about what's going on here, because we know that this is a state that deserves to, and we have the documented history where we know that we can get election integrity here if we can muster the public outcry, if we can muster folks to come out again this weekend. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but let me get into some of these examples.
All right.
So just starting on November the 4th in Chatham County, Georgia. At this point, as reported by The Hill in the last 2 days, there is a certified poll watcher did confirm and has signed affidavit to the fact that they saw 53 ballots that had arrived after the 7 p.m. GA deadline being mixed in with on-time ballots. And again, that was in Chatham County, which is in good old Savannah, Georgia. So to give folks an idea of where that's located.
Yep.
And I just want to start with this small example, and this is an example, and just to confirm, this is a case, a particular instance that's now cited nationally, and there's federal litigation pending, I guess, at this point, as of late Wednesday, based upon this affidavit. Georgia's late ballots, which were counted in the first round of voting and tabulation that we're still seeing completed as of today, as I started, the vote is not complete. Those votes were counted, but they are now being separated. And I just want to confirm for the audience, just so they understand, is that every state has different rules, and basically different rules around the cutoff time for when ballots are accepted, what makes it out legal or illegal, essentially, which is the Republican, or I would say it's the moderate constitutionalist argument.
Yeah.
And in Georgia, it's rather conservative, or I would say constitutionalist, in terms of the absentee ballot had to be in by 7 p.m. on Tuesday night. Now, the counting may continue thereafter, but it's a clear cutoff. Now, we do have some exceptions. Now, folks have provisional ballots or ballots that need to be cured. We have a very open, liberal electoral process. We're allowing thousands of provisional ballots. Basically, election workers walk to your door. If you have an absent signature, some error, something that doesn't invalidate the ballot, but it's not yet complete, it can't be processed. We actually allow that to be cured through Friday of election week. So
wow.
Excluding that, there are these cutoffs, but I just wanted to kind of explain that it's not, this is not the Jim Crow Georgia that people are going to demonize us for in the coming days. But regardless, that was one of the first documented cases, and that is one of the first cases that's moved to standing litigation. So I wanted to kind of go there, and then quickly wanted to jump to events as of yesterday and what you and others are seeing in the news.
Yeah.
As of yesterday, I right about this time yesterday, Secretary of State of Georgia, Raffensperger. In Georgia, it's Republican. Many may know we've got Kemp as the governor, 2018. Beat a certain sore loser Democrat that some folks might remember. I won't name her now.
Last name is Abrams.
That's right. And she'll be on some alternate outlets while we're having this conversation.
I'm sure.
But ultimately, Mr. Raffensperger did he's actually on Twitter. On his official handle came out, and that's if it's still up at this time. His tweet at that time is that significant irregularities have been found in the count in Fulton County, Georgia. Again, this is as of Saturday night, and that is Atlanta, North and South Metro County, which is basically, Metro Atlanta, home to almost 1.1 million souls. And he continued to tweet out yesterday, was actually on site at the election center and they confirmed that over 1,000 ballots had been improperly processed on the Friday count. So in the count of just 24 hours prior,
Yeah.
and that he himself was personally on site with election board officials to correctly process and continue to review the activities at the Fulton County site.
Right.
So I just wanted to throw those two out there, significant instances in those cases alone, at least a couple thousand ballots at stake. And then, if we just wanted to roughly put it, that's 15% of the current margin, between the president and the Vice President Biden at this time. So it's a very small margin, and we found significant irregularities here. And David, just to give people a little bit more context.
Yeah.
There were also some Georgia runoff elections that are now pending that are really put the stake of the U.S. Senate up in the air as these runoffs are coming in January.
Right.
So as you know, in one, we had a special election with Republican as Loeffler. Loeffler, and did a little research on her today. We all know she's the billionaire, kind of billionaire, big bucks Republican, but actually I confirmed she is the wealthiest Republican, wealthiest senator in the U.S. Senate at a net wealth with her husband of $520 million asset.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to put that out there, and I just want you to know I'm kind of going to share one of my votes.
Yeah.
From the election, and Doug Collins did challenge her for that seat.
Yeah.
And as many may remember, Doug led a good part of the House of Representatives minority opposition to the Trump impeachment, and might recall he was kind of a part of that whole theater show. But at least kind of from his side, kind of tried to pump the brakes. So
yeah,
kind of where Doug has kind of increased his profile. But anyway, right now, Loeffler and Collins have basically split the Republican vote.
Mm-hmm.
Warnock, the Democrat, has captured less than a third of the electorate, but enough to cheat anybody of a majority. So they are certainly, that's confirmed, will go to January runoff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much settled regardless of this presidential piece. And then just want to comment also with regard to David Perdue and John Ossoff, that was our regular election this year.
Yeah.
And at this time, David Perdue, before the recount, folks, stands at 49.8% of the count.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think if you take a look, we don't have Greens on the ballot here for the national ticket.
Yep.
But Jo Jorgensen is up there, and she got about 1.2 to 1.3% of the vote, about 61,000 votes. So there's a little bit of the margin. But regardless, it looks like Perdue is going to be short of a swing in recount. So just kind of wanted to highlight that because, change in the U.S. Senate in January is also a big question mark.
Yeah. So you're in a high stakes environment in that state right now, and I'm sure they're going to dump some serious money into those runoffs and raise the profile of their candidates of choice. How many electoral votes is Georgia? Do you know?
We are 16 votes, I believe.
Yeah, so that's a significant, when you combine that with like a state like Pennsylvania, right, which I think is it 30, if I'm not mistaken?
Pennsylvania is only 20 now, actually. It's only 20. Yeah.
But that between those two states, that's 36 electoral votes. So again, what do you think of, I know people are just, because you stay on Twitter for a little while and you kind of think the world is ending, right? You have that perception. People are saying, it's a lost cause. The current president plans on doing, I think, a big legal challenge starting tomorrow. I know he's lawyered up with some pretty successful attorneys who've represented some characters over the years who've really got.
We see Sidney Powell up there, for instance.
Yeah, and
right,
the gentleman's name, Lynn Davis or something. He represented Richard Jewell, the guy who was falsely accused of the bombing. I think it was in Atlanta, of all places, in 1996, and a couple of other people. The Covington kid who went viral, which was just one of the worst moments in this country, really. Just It's like if you do the wrong thing at the wrong time and you're on camera, it's just it's horrendous. It's like social media times 100. And then obviously the media I think is very corrupt in this. Uh, you
Absolutely.
whether look, and I'm going to say this, and I've said it to Charles, I said it to other people on the show. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, that's not the point. The point is integrity, election integrity. We heard
That's right,
about
Dave. You nailed it.
Russian collusion. We heard about all kinds of things, and this year it's big corporate media collusion. Like, I mean, you can't. It's probably billions of dollars in free advertising and positive sort of reinforcing press and Fox News, which was once, yeah, definitely more to the right. Okay. But a source that I think had more of an independent streak that would listen to sort of rogue candidates. I would think that Tulsi Gabbard, by the way, would have gotten a better hearing on Fox News. She had a couple of good experiences there and a couple of really disastrous experiences over there. But
Right.
we're looking now at a media that, unless you subscribe to some other network or go out of your way to go on alternative sites and so forth, and most Americans don't do that, which is sad to me, but it's just the way it is. Then you've got
Hmm.
Facebook, you've got Twitter. Facebook, you know, it's funny. I'm about ready to pull the plug on my Facebook account, and
Okay.
I used Messenger on Facebook yesterday. I don't know if any you've done this recently. It's kind of a private messaging service, right, between you and another person.
I
Well,
thought it was.
yeah, as soon as I started to type a message, and I'm not the fastest typist, a pop up was in the box that said, "Congratulations to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for winning the presidency." And I was at that point, I'm like, I think I'm beginning to understand what Orwell was writing about, you know? Um,
Wow.
we are in a different landscape, and more progressive folks need to understand, you know, they come for a certain group, they came for like Alex Jones first, or they came for
That's right.
people who were supposedly conspiracy theorists and way out on a limb, you know, and they gradually start to take out truth tellers like Glenn Greenwald, who nobody's
That's right.
who's going to accuse Glenn Greenwald of being Alex Jones. You know, they're two different planets. They have two different ways of dealing with things and so forth. And um, Greenwald is just trying to dig. He's just trying to say, hey, look, this isn't what you think it is. Stop cheerleading. We're in a different world right now. And if we allow what you're talking about in Georgia, and I'm sure there are other people who could come forward from their states. I've heard incredible horror stories that you can't verify. You just have people that give you an anecdotal moment where they were at a polling place, or they heard this person do this, or they, you know, I know
Right.
Project Veritas was doing these things where they had people going to these polling places, and you had them on tape, and then of course people go, well, that's Veritas, they've got this agenda, they just want Trump to win.
And
um
that's another discredited source, and the Overton window closes
right,
again.
right.
Right.
Now,
If I wonder if I could speak to that, because it
go ahead.
really does come down to, if we want to take these anecdotes from the states, if we really want to turn that into political action,
Hmm.
we have to recognize the systemic issue with election integrity. And it really comes down to, in part, the media, which you identify,
Hmm.
is the elephant in the room. It's that constant struggle, right? And that we have a media that has abdicated on its core work,
Yeah.
right? And in terms of whatever that is, some kind of bourgeois, like shuffling off in terms of whatever's going on with this economic shock. In part, they're just beholden.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the other prong to the media in terms of election integrity is the voting systems themselves. And I actually
Yeah.
kind of took a journey today, and I guess it's maybe the kind of develops the thought, something I wanted to kind of explore here. And I wanted to kind of speak to the systemic piece, and I did want to bring up. I don't know if you're really familiar with her work, but Bethany Blankley.
Mhm.
Speaking about independent journalism, so she had an article out yesterday that she put out on Center Square, and it really spoke to threading the needle here. And
Mhm.
and you spoke to it too. There's we have different independent groups looking into you know both the counting and the tabulation, but like what's been going on with the machines as well. And
Yeah. Dominion.
uh, you know, that's right. That's exactly it. And I kind of stepped into that. I don't know if we want to call it a rabbit hole. It's really more of it's a disaster in plain sight, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you probably remember Diebold back in 2004 and
Yes.
2006.
Yes, I do.
And remember how much fun we had with that in the backdrop of the Bush reelection. And it's that was probably the last time that we really had uh, that the call for integrity hadn't been as drowned out. Although we have issues every time, I think there was a big push, and we recognized the machines and the just the corporate contracting of this entire process and how that just has exposed it
Mhm.
and just left our election, the belly of our elections open to the fraud. But anyway, kind of, coming back today, Dominion is the new Diebold, right?
It is.
And to kind of just characterize this ecosystem, just kind of going off of Bethany's work, and folks can go check out her article, as I had kind of intimated.
Sure.
There are three major corporations that basically deliver and service the voting machines and software that almost all of us use,
Mhm.
right? And that's and it depends on your state. You might have two or three of these companies there, but the two largest ones are going to be Dominion Voting Systems that Dave mentioned.
Yeah.
The second is ES&S, and that's Electronic Systems and Software.
Mhm.
And then, and I think I shared that with you earlier today, Dave, and they had an interesting street address there, in particular, ES&S at John Galt Way or
Oh.
whatever. I know. It's like that's one messed up cocktail party where they came up with it.
Well, it's like the
It's
0060606 Trace Act or whatever. You just can't. You're like, no, no, stop. You could. Why didn't you skip that number? Why did you do that? It's and then
where's my tinfoil?
yeah.
Where did I put it?
Well, but then you're thinking, are they just trying to tweak us? Because that's after a while you start to think they're because all of those crazy right wingers are like, see. I mean, it's like you're feeding them. It's like, here you go, have your dinner, and now you can make yourself look like a fool. Then we can discredit you.
That's right.
We could do a skit on SNL and just throw, you'll be wearing the hat, and we're
Right.
thinking to ourselves, all we want to do is count the votes. We're not asking for much. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard said paper ballots and count the paper ballots.
And
Look,
that's it.
it's work. It's work, but guess what? It's way more, you would think it's way more secure. There is an interesting little conspiracy theory going on, and I did
Yeah.
float it over on Twitter about the ballots being digitally watermarked, which would be really interesting if it were true, which means that they could track each individual ballot if it actually was counted, um, whose name is actually on that ballot. And so, I mean, it's like your DNA basically. They can kind of figure out everything
Right.
about it. I'm really, and again, maybe it's just me not wanting to see this all play out the way it's playing out through the media. But man, oh man, what I'd like to see this truck thrown in hard reverse right now. It would be kind of fun to see the media and how they would handle, because like you mentioned it
Right.
about how the media constructs this, where they use words like Donald Trump is going to challenge this. He's making allegations, but they're patently false. Okay. As we say on Twitter, where are your receipts for this false, patently false thing?
That's right.
I mean, it's because you say it doesn't mean it's true. Because I could say, hey, Caz is wearing a blue sweater and Caz is not wearing a blue sweater. But if I say it, maybe people will believe me. I don't know.
They're inverting the very concept of scholastic or public citation.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is then calling on the content reviewer, the fact checker to flag, but with no citation. And so it's not even as if they're trying to reach the liberal standard. It's just the imposition of really of the inverse, which is a political flag
Yeah.
with no basis. And that's what people are realizing. But they're also being simultaneously conditioned, right, to accept the flag. I mean, and that is in and of itself very, again, I said psychologically, but it alters behavior very quickly, and that's the danger.
Trust the CDC, trust Dr. Fauci. I mean, we had a big wind up to this, and there's so much crossover. There's so much correlation between what started happening in March and where we are now and where we still are. By the way, we had huge, gigantic gatherings in Washington, D.C.
I saw that.
People
very festive up there. Yeah.
I didn't notice any of the MSNBC commentators worrying about any of the super spreading that was going on there. So this is kind of interesting. Plays into the theory that my son came up with, who's 16 years old, and he said to me, Dad,
okay.
I think maybe this stuff might go away on November 4th if Biden wins. I don't know. I don't think it will necessarily. I think they'll stop talking about it for a little while because they're gonna continue their faux celebration, and of course they're gonna mimic or make ridicule Trump when he comes out and does his press conference, which I'm sure will be pretty robust. I don't think whether Trump survives this or not, he's going to go down with both guns blazing. And he has every right to do it. He spent 4.5, 5 years right now just fighting whatever thing they threw at him. And whether you like him or not, this has nothing to do with that. It's, imagine if these politicians got together and they said, hey, this guy seems to want to do opportunity zones in the inner cities. Maybe we can work with him and do an even better version of that, but we're too busy playing tribal politics, and people don't like him because he's mean. I get it. Everybody who said, I was reading these rock star tweets today, and they're all like, well, America will be a nice country again. It'll be a friendly country. And it's not, the president doesn't make.
It's all decorum over substance, Dave.
Yeah.
It's all decorum over substance. And they want to substitute the old neoliberal facade.
Yeah.
They want to bring it back in as a substitute for policy, for their failing policy, as if the window dressing is all we were looking at anymore.
Right.
And I know maybe that, that kind of, just gets into the whole, it's the gaslight, it's their whole fractured coalition.
Yeah.
And I just want to say this, that they have built it to exclude the center of America, the center right and the center left are excluded from that entire political paradigm. And that is why they're moving both to censor the content and they're moving in with the fact checkers, because their consolidation of power is tenuous, Dave.
Yeah.
It is tenuous, and because of their institutional weakness, they are throwing the gauntlet. And it's just, what I think it ultimately comes down to is that party, the Democratic Party, has reached a point where it is so parasitic.
Yeah.
Is that it's either captured or excluded or repulsed, might be a better word, the electorate to such extremes that it can only rely on misinformation to perpetuate.
Yeah. Well, case in point, here in the state of Florida, Donald Trump did win fairly handily in Florida, by the way. I think it was a 300,000, 400,000 vote spread. I didn't get the final totals, but they could stop counting here in Florida because it was such a big total. And the governor here and everybody else seemed to know how to run an election, and it went really smoothly. All these people, all these signs you see around me, they were all part of the folks in my area who were elected. Some of them weren't. I just got a few extra signs to fill the space, but
it's really cool. I like that. It's a cool upgrade.
Yeah, well, I needed a different background. I could flip this around to do my music background, but
there we go.
do the politics. I would do this instead, and I think it's better. But what was interesting though were some of the billboards and some of the signs that I was reading for Joe Biden, and some of the commercials that
Mhm.
were running. I don't know if they ran these commercials in Georgia. I think I had a conversation again with my other cohorts here on the show, but there was one commercial that was very interesting, that Joe Biden understands us as a family. It was a woman who was I believe, a school part-time substitute teacher, and her husband
Okay.
works in a factory. And they got two perfectly sized kids, boy and a girl, and they're at the kitchen table. It's classic Americana. And it's
Sure.
like Joe Biden understands families like ours, and he really gets it. And it wasn't anything like you said. You made a good point about policy. Now there wasn't any talk. He just gets it. He's not saying to us, "You're going to keep more of your take-home pay," or "We're going to make sure you guys have great health care," or
Right.
none of those policy issues. It was just a feeling, and we've seen this in politics for so long. Where I like him, he's like my grandfather, and he's nice, and but
Right.
we don't talk about what he's done to incarcerate millions of people. We don't talk about the fact that he's voted for every war that's come down the pike, and some were an absolute. In fact, he was the Democrat who spearheaded George W. Bush's pivot when he was going after Saddam Hussein rather than going after the terrorists, as he used to like to say. So
Right.
really, like, the misinformation. And then there was this billboard that I saw today that was still up in Fort Myers.
Mhm.
Me and my wife went out to lunch, and I'm looking up at the billboard, and it says, "I'm a patriot, I'm a Republican, and it's some random guy from Sarasota, Florida. I'm voting for Joe Biden." I was like, wow.
Hmm.
So
Just coming right out. There we are.
yeah, so if they did actually win this election, which I'm not convinced that they did. If they did, they just took Trump's playbook, ripped Trump's picture out of it, put in the nice guy supposedly, and said, "Here, just vote for him. Things are just going to kind of continue on the way they are." And I don't believe that either. I think next year he's going to get pressured to do all of these cultural things that you talked about, the center left and the center right. People in this country are pretty decent people. They might disagree,
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
they might disagree on, what I call the wedge issues, things like abortion, or I don't know, some of this stuff coming down that has to do with like immigration. There's another one that people are
Sure.
fighting about. But most people can coexist and live with one another with those issues, and talk across the fence, across the yard, and say, "Hey, Bob, how are you today?" "Good." And people can get along. It seems like we've been in this division, this political like bleep storm for so long that
Yeah.
it and like I told you before we started recording, I'm just fatigued. I mean,
Yeah.
to talk about politics today on November 8th after what we've been through. I mean, I must be a diehard man. I must want to just do this for a living.
Well, we might both be. It's us, and a few other folks.
Yeah.
But I just have to say, to your point, what Joe's ad, what that ad is speaking to, that American family at the table, like that center coalition that you just spoke to, they're speaking to that working class Americana person, that literally that 85% of us.
Hmm.
But again, it's that misrepresentation,
Yeah.
because it's constantly the bait and switch, because the policy has never been there. And yet, folks get that pressure, especially with and I'm just going to say it, critical race theory,
Yeah.
with, with that piece. It's kind of that the counter force, right? And it was prevailing, I think, in part. as you see, I mean, you want to talk about ethnic coalitions or just working class coalitions. I mean, Florida,
Yeah.
just amazing. Just the Black, Hispanic
Yeah.
coalition there, the white working class coalition together.
Hmm.
Biggest and representative, as we know nationally, the biggest, multiracial coalition turning out for Republicans since 1960.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's just now to me, that is where the message and the action of the last 4 years aligned, right? And that's where you and I
Hmm.
deserve to see the election review process bear out, because we've seen these payoffs and we've seen these historical trends. We have the mandate, and
Hmm.
until we're done, until January the 20th,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna rest either. And we're gonna be right here, and we're gonna keep moving the ball to get this information out, because this is the time when they want to marginalize you and what you know the most
Yeah.
in these transitions, especially with all the questions we have.
Yeah.
So I just, and I know that I'm tired, and I mean, I should say we're not tired, but we're going to get a break,
Yeah.
and we're going to have the next couple days and weeks to regroup. And I think we're going to hear a lot more federally and stateside.
Yeah.
That's going to be very revealing. And,
Well,
I,
it's again, it's pushing back against what we're going to, like I told you about the headline about Trump makes claim that's false, and there's no source, as you say, there's no receipts for that, and it continues.
right,
People read these phrases and they just say to their friends, see, the claim is false, and okay, well, who said it was false? And we are in a strange time right now. We're in kind of a limbo phrase. And I'm getting the sense that some on what I call the neo progressive side or just straight up neoliberal side, those who kind of sheep herded a little bit and they said, well, Biden's not really who we want, but we'll get some stuff done with him. It'll be okay. And I'm getting the sense, though, that they might be looking at these numbers, some of these numbers that you cited. I
yes,
believe in one of the states, and I can't verify this, but I read a couple of articles, and I think there might be some truth to it that either in Michigan or in Wisconsin, there were more Democrat votes than registered Democrat voters. So again, I just want everything verified. If that's the
that's
case,
right,
that would be an enormous scandal. But during the Trump administration, we've seen, okay, well, this is going to be an enormous scandal over here. And we've got people on tape basically saying that, early on that they were looking at the current president before he even got
right,
elected and listening to his campaign and so forth. And then we had the fake Steele dossier, which was debunked and so forth. But the media, once it got debunked, they left it alone, but they never told everybody that it was debunked. And we just kept going and going with that. Again,
right.
I keep telling my libertarian friends and some of the people that have been saying, Dave, what difference does it make? They both kind of suck. And I'm like, okay, but we have to have an election that's clean. Even
That's absolutely it.
my friend Pasta, who is more progressive, and he was on the show. He told me, candidly, he said if it's a clean election, Trump will win and win fairly easily, and that was his opinion. And he's no fan of Donald Trump. He just said this is, so we, as you say, I think we need to be truth tellers. I think we have to fight on. I think we have to continue to provide information from alternate sources. Um, I don't know. I want to stay on Twitter. Twitter is a bit of a cesspool. I have a Parler account that I've used intermittently, and then Facebook, which is basically just censorship overload. So it is difficult in times like these to feel as though that, like I'm here and maybe my friend Caz is out there, my friend Charles is
Right.
out there, and you know, we care about the country, we care about democracy. I mean, if this, I think if this is allowed to stand without a lot,
Well, it's 70 million people, right?
okay, yeah,
70 million people deserve to see
right,
to see it proven out.
yeah, and it was a, you hear that a guy who stayed underground for most of his campaign, did not really have campaign events. I mean, if you want to call them that, that's fine. And he got more votes than anybody else in the history of the country. Again, use a little logic and common sense and come to any kind of just moderate conclusion. They're saying that seems a little fishy. Just a kid would say that. That's doesn't seem right, Dad, you know? And I would say, yeah, it doesn't. But people, they hated Donald Trump so much that they voted for a 78-year-old who has trouble constructing a full sentence. So again, we're at
But
that
you bring, you kind of like a question, Dave, and it's that the you know, what's the meme? It's the those brunch voters, the
brunch.
center left
Go,
liberal, right?
go
That
back to
they're
brunch. Yeah.
yeah, they're back to brunch. They're ready to go, and they are all. It seems, you know, if the stereotype is true, they're all too ready to just not any questions inside of their victory, right? Just not ready to interrogate, you know, especially after 4 years of Russiagate accusations, or really longer. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing just the lack of self-awareness, and again tells me the big part of that constituency is a low information
Mm, yeah, I've heard that.
MSM, you know, consumer.
Yeah. Well, you know, I equate it to the casual rock fan to kind of bridge the gap to my other channel where they don't know really who's in the band anymore, and you can switch out different players and throw the name on the marquee. Everybody goes,
Right.
"Wow, it's Fleetwood Mac in concert. I love Fleetwood Mac." Yeah, well, they booted their guitarist who was like the genius in the group. Who's he? What's his name? Never mind. We'll stop there and you go enjoy the show, pay $150 for the ticket and grab yourself a $14 beer and enjoy yourself.
Oh,
Um,
there's blackjack. There's blackjack out in the lobby, you
yeah,
know, because, you know, we're at the, you know,
yeah.
casino right now.
So you know what I'm talking about. And it's, I mean, if we're not careful, you know, I'll never forget that quote from Benjamin Franklin. You know, I think it was Ben Franklin. They asked
Mhm.
him, "What have you given us, sir?" And he said, "We've given you a republic if you can keep it." My take on this right now is we're losing. Some people would say we've lost it. We're never going to get back. I would say it's kind of like we're holding on to the rope and the rope is sliding through our hands and we're trying to grab it, but you've got the
Right.
weight of sort of apathy. Apathy is number one. And then you've got this media apparatus, number two. And now you've got censorship and you've got sort of this wall. Remember when Tulsi Gabbard won that debate and her name was searched more than any other name on Google?
Through the roof.
And then she tried to use her AdSense account and they blocked it. She wanted to advertise at the key point where she could like pick up enormous momentum. Who is that woman? You know, let's find out. And nope. So
No,
this,
let's put Tulsi Gabbard in the memory hole is
right.
what we did.
Yeah. I don't know.
And maybe Dave, that's if this doesn't bear out for the president, you know, ultimately, then the post-mortem here, you know, goes back to the foreshadowing there with Tulsi, right? And her Google censorship. And by the way, she came out more forcefully
Mm-hmm.
publicly in her ads in the primary against Google, fantastic, multiple ads against big tech,
Yeah.
more forcefully than any other candidate or any other national figure has from the inception of the censorship period, in my book.
Yeah, she did. She did. Wasn't nutty about her Twitter post today, but I will just, you know, Tulsi is Tulsi. Tulsi is polite. She's diplomatic. I try to
She's a
embody.
real maverick, and
Yeah,
we'll deprecate John McCain, and we'll deprecate him, and
yeah,
we'll give that back. We'll take that back.
yeah. I try as hard as I'm not as good as her. I've said that. I'm just not the kind of person she is. Like, she is willing to play aloha with people that I wouldn't play aloha with. So, but to her credit, she's enormously consistent, and
Mhm.
she is somebody that would have been that soothing balm for the country at the moment where it really needed it, where I could be happy and say, Donald Trump, thank you for your service to the country. You kind of dug us out of that rut between the neo-libs and the neoconservatives. Thank you for doing that for the country.
Mhm.
But we're passing the torch over to Tulsi Gabbard, who plans on bringing everybody in, embracing some of your ideas, but probably taking us to a better place overall with her own decent ideas and things that, actual issues that people can wrap their brains around. But I'm not there saying that today, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
it's
But
bizarre.
you're speaking, man. I love you, Dave, because you're speaking exactly. It's the nexus point
Yeah.
of the Trumpism and where Tulsi wants to take us, and what it really is. When it gets down to is, there's the new political chart, like where do you land, and they do,
Yeah.
the left and the right, in terms of the political spectrum. But then it's really the y-axis is the power dynamic of state versus the individual.
Right.
Our coalition our coalition is about little L libertarians
Yes.
across the political spectrum getting together and renewing the social mandate in this country behind a unifier like a Gabbard who can bridge the political and defines the authoritarian versus libertarian, which is what has got people, with the technological jump we've made, has got people, spinning. Everybody's spinning, Dave.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 31 years old, and I didn't grow up with any of this technology. I mean, until after college, almost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The cleavage I see in just the last decade is it's hard to imagine. So it's understandable that there's a lot of ground we have to make in the review and updating our standards. You know what I mean? As a country coming together, and we have to be able to put in the regulations, right?
Yeah.
To kind of bring us back. So
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. I've argued with some. I mean, they're good people. I don't have an issue with straight up hardcore libertarians, but they tell me, well, big tech, they're a private company, and whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, remember? You see, you talk about being kind of a younger person. When all of these platforms were launched, like YouTube was like, hey, it's
yeah,
called YouTube because these videos are about you. You get to upload, you get to share, and it was kind of like a site you played around with. It wasn't like this serious
right.
thing that it's become. And then it evolved, and then people started to get thousands of subscribers, and then they monetized, and then it became a real business. And it's an interesting and very impressive business model. But we've
Yes,
learned that because of its power, and people from all across the political spectrum can share and post content and so forth, what's happened is that it doesn't seem as though it's kept up with what we're trying to do as individuals. What that platform originally started to do, was more like, hey, cat videos and some of the goofy things. And now we're all kind of over here at, hey, I want to talk too. I'm serious about what I want to do. And YouTube is like, well, can you make some more cat videos? And can we get more little kid video? I mean, the biggest YouTube star is a little kid by the name of Ryan,
hmm
and then other guys who started early on. But now we're at a point where we've kind of maxed that out, and we're kind of like, okay, you're only going to let us go so far with all of this content. Like, you can't talk about COVID. You start talking
they
about,
pulled back the famed lottery lever, as it were. And whether that's the business model, or they're saturated the market. They've
yeah,
it throttles both content and directionally. They're just, you kind of compare it to, how TikTok is kind of where
yeah,
the
you
the
talk
uh, lottery seekers are going, right?
incredible. It's just incredible. And that obviously has an impact. There are a bunch of, but see, this is the entertainment culture, and I kind of don't want to embrace it. I've always been like, no, I want a serious politician. I want somebody who, grew up as a politician and worked their way up, was in the state Senate, then they got to the United States Senate, then they got to the presidency. That's the way you're supposed to kind of do it, right? But we've seen with Trump, and a lot of, Arnold Schwarzenegger would be another example. Mark Cuban has
Right,
toyed around with it, and everybody says, no, Dave, you need pop culture, you need name ID. I mean, I've been hearing all kinds of rumblings, like who might want to run in 2024, and it's a list of celebrities. It's not. It's we want to
right.
because the power of name ID is a thing. I don't like it, but it's a thing when you already have, you're Kanye West and you say, I'm going to run for president, and you get, a whole bunch of votes. People vote for you because you're Kanye West, not because you have ideas. So you talk about a nexus. Maybe the next big leader who comes through is somebody who is educated, but who has kind of a background where people say, okay, I like that guy in the role that he was in doing this. And I've seen him doing that, or her. And now maybe it's time. They've got the name ID. They want to truly help the country. They're not about themselves. It's one path. I'm looking at kind of like the American Idol version of politics, which again, I hate being the music purist I am. I like guys who learn how to play guitar and then played in bands and played in clubs and then worked their way up to the record label contract. But you're right.
I think it's a healthy comparison, Dave, because I mean, if in any career or occupation, right? You think about, by merit or accomplishment or by product. I mean,
Yeah.
How do you shake out what leads an industry,
Yeah.
right? And that's the question. And so what's happened is it's the digital eye, whatever you want to call it, has found and has exploited and has communalized all of these existing industries, right? And it's blowing them up.
Yeah.
And apparently it's blown up. It'll blow up the White House too.
Apparently.
Clearly.
So Caz, here's a big question for you. Are corporations more powerful right now than the government in general, or are they on equal footing? What would you, or is it sort of we talk about an oligarchy. Is it a corporate garchy? That's my word, by the way.
I like it. I guess it's a good question, Dave. And, for me, just a little bit of my political orientation, like small L libertarian, and I consider myself a centrist. And I think, I'm just got to be honest, I think it was inappropriate for corporation, and this is inside of America, my American perspective, that corporations are not people. Yes. And that may not be that controversial here, but it's not the law in the United States, right? So yeah, we've really handed a lot of regulation and a lot of and ceded so much of our constitutional authority that should be that vis-a-vis us and our representatives has been transferred in so many ways, right? And it's so funny. Just an example is Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the hoopla going into the election. And, again, a lot of political capital was needed to put her in place going into that. And again, things are moving so quickly. It's like you can't even really do a debrief on that. But, just with respect to her, it's like, what kind of ultimately, does that even deliver? And in anyway, it's just interesting to see, ultimately, whether their entire focus, Dave, as you may know, is and if it's going to change, I posit is whether there's a conservative court that does anything outside of it, but they're entirely focused on business law.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what they're up there to do. And really, if you actually look at her career, that's ultimately her that's her wheelhouse, right? Yeah. And I understand that, but again, we are just paving the way for that global corporate infrastructure, that just a continuation of that neoliberal arc, right back at it.
Yeah, 100% agree. I just, when you look at, I had these 3 points that I had done a video on that was like certainly non-Tulsi related. It was more just who has control of this right now? Like who are the big players? Corporations are just, Comcast alone as an entity, what they did to facilitate Biden's campaign. Trump, to his credit, I know he probably takes some money sort of on the down low from some of these people, but Comcast was like, okay, where can we write that check and how many zeros?
That's right.
look, if you and guess whose content's getting filtered or whose internet's getting unplugged or whatever. I mean, the power that these people have to kind of be kingmakers is breathtaking, because again, you talked about sort of folks are dumbed down. You know, they I showed you about the pop-up in my messenger. There are pop-ups. I mean, you can go anywhere. You get disclaimers underneath videos. You get disclaimers when you log on to a site.
We're being shunted. We're being shunted around decision points. That's really what this is.
Yeah. But it's
information and decision points.
yeah. And then obviously you've got, you know, people they're saying, well, Wall Street will do great under a President Biden. It did very well under President Trump. It will, and that scares me too, because it's just like, okay, Wall Street, no matter who's in office, Wall Street continues to, during Obama, which was a stagnation of like 8 years for the working class, the middle class, the working poor, digging, trying to get out of that hole. Okay, well, you know, companies, small businesses want deregulation. Didn't happen. So you look up and you see Wall Street. Wall Street's just, they've been chugging along. They have little dips, but what happens is then they do the hockey stick, and there's something wrong there.
And they always come running, right. And we always come with the open purse, right? Or our Congress, which are totally ineffectual Congress, is always so disposed, always.
Yeah, and they just doing the bidding. So you've got corporations, you got Wall Street, and then the third thing that I think is enormously controlling. There were a lot of investigations that I think that could have moved forward in the last 4 years that were against the Democratic Party or members in the Democratic Party who obviously were out to frame President Trump and get him and so forth. And it seems as though they had legitimate points to make, but no investigations ever went forward. And I'm thinking now that these intelligence agencies, and this is just a no-brainer commentary here, most of them seem to be very partisan and almost, I mean, everything seems to be colluded in the wrong way. You've got corporations, you've got Wall Street, you've got these influencers now where the president gets installed and then these folks actually dictate policy and do this.
Right.
And you know, even Trump, I think, didn't realize when he got to Washington how constrained he was going to be. And I think that's why he brought in some shady people like a Bolton or a Pompeo or whoever, because he was basically, well, I better play the game a little bit, make these people think that I'm not overtly hostile to that. What do you?
Right. He was flirting institutionally, effectively. He attempted to, but ultimately it was an institutional war.
Yeah.
And whatever Trump's other failings, he clearly froze out the neocons and the war hawk wing. Effectively, we saw how Crystal and the others fled the party so very quickly. And I mean, listen, that's probably, for any of us who were anti-war over the last 15 years, it was the sweetest thing.
Yeah.
Period.
I'm not shedding a tear over George Will's anger over Donald Trump. George Will, he was okay like in 1983, George Will. It was just one of those things where you said to yourself, here's an institutional, like blue blood. And, honestly, no group probably irritates me more than blue blood, like George H.W. Bush style Republicans, and his son as well. His son came in trying to be a populist, but he ended up being just like worse than his dad in some ways, but carried on.
Don't you know, Dave, how friendly they are in the Kenny Bunfort community up there in Maine?
Yeah.
They're at the local grocer. They're great. They're fantastic.
Well, if you remember, the elder Bush he was frightened when he went into a supermarket. I don't know if you ever saw the footage of him being frightened by the scanner supermarkets back in 1991 or 92 on the campaign trail. And that was a bad photo op, and that didn't go well. That definitely helped Bill Clinton secure that election.
Oh, yeah.
Ross Perot, who was spooked by the FBI after they said they were going to take out his kids or something, which at the time everybody said tinfoil hat. Well, fast forward 25, 30 years later, and I'm thinking to myself, that probably actually happened. And
Absolutely. I've heard Ross has said that that was in the record at the time.
yep,
He was on track to place
got too
second
close.
or first place.
He
Yep.
got too close. He was on track. Clinton was not on fire. Um, I mean, see, again, this is me, my age here. Perot ran these infomercials. Basically, he would buy a half hour on primetime network TV, which, by the way, they would never allow anybody to do that now. It was amazing. But they took Perot's money. He'd get up there with his little chalkboard or his telestrator or whatever, and he started telling people about how, you know, we were hemorrhaging jobs all over the world to China and to all these countries, and talk about being prophetic. Like, but
Right.
he worked in it. He was this, I mean, this was a true businessman who ran businesses and saw that this was happening to him. So he just said, hey, I can help stop this. We got to stop having these stupid trade deals. And where have we heard that lately? So
It's like
again,
ring a ding ding. Here we are.
yeah.
Exactly.
And so, you know, to wrap this video up, didn't want to go too long because I just wanted to have you come on and discuss some of this election stuff more or less. But, you know, I figured we'd cover a few other items. What do you think's ultimately going to happen? I'll give you your take, and then I'll give everyone my take, and then I will wrap it up.
Sure. So again, David, it's great to be on with you, and I'm sure, you know, plenty of fun to go down the next 70 some days or so. So if I can join you again as we learn more about what's going on in Georgia and kind of what's going on nationally. But as for my 2 cents, you know, what I'm focused on here is I'm focused on I'm going to be calling my state election officials on Monday, looking for update as to the dates of the recount here. And as far as I'm concerned, I think the first bench post or goal post for us to all look at is getting certifications of all the ballots in these 5 or 6 swing states.
Yeah.
So I know that we see Michigan and Pennsylvania, you know, called, you know, those elections are not certified. North Carolina is not certified.
Right.
Georgia and Arizona and Nevada still are pending in terms of final certification. So I just want everybody to be very aware that directionally you should look for those. Those elections are going to close out, of course, but it's going to be over the next week. So there are going to be big developments. You're going to see more litigation. And I'm going to be focused on Georgia, of course. But from there, again, it's about election integrity first, Dave. So I want to see that. I want to see us jump that hoop if we can do it in the great state of Georgia. And I know we can. We just got to keep pressuring our elected officials at the state level, and we will. And with that, I do hope, you know, I voted for President Trump. This is the second time. And I would never have imagined a year ago saying that, but we have been through the gauntlet.
Yep.
And after the violence, you know, the protesting that occurred.
Yeah.
Certainly going back to George Floyd, that was the tipping point for me. And I know for tens of millions of Americans who were on the fence about, again, we're on the fence about decorum, whatever. We're centrists. But when it comes down to law and order and safety and security, you know, we reached a tipping point as a country. And regardless of whether or not the president wins, we were motivated. We formed an incredible coalition, and it's historical for both sides, and we should recognize that.
Yeah.
But I hope to see that we will prevail in the recount in Georgia, and I believe it's very, very likely that we will, given the irregularities I've documented and I'm continuing to research here. So, anyway, I'm here for the truth, and I know we're going to get the truth.
Wow. Excellent. Amen. Yeah, I want to be optimistic. And I think it's in my nature to kind of be contrarian, to kind of take an alternate view. Like somebody will say something to me about an issue and I'll go, well, have you ever thought of the other side of that issue? You know, and I don't do it. I do it as I'm a skeptic. I want people to, you know, make their case to me, sell me on what you're, you know, like a salesman. And during this election cycle, I didn't see any real salesmanship on one side, whereas the other side was, like Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. It was, again, the greatest show on earth. You don't have to like it all, but you feel Americana. You feel like you're still part of a country that likes itself. One thing during this whole run up the last year or so is that I met a lot of, or I interacted with a lot of people that really didn't like the country in a way that was different than before. It wasn't like, oh, America
Hmm.
has a fault, or America could use a facelift, or America could fix this and we'd be better. It was just so systemic and so broken, and so then it becomes to a point where that person is so toxic in their dislike of everything that I didn't feel comfortable interacting with those people anymore. I feel like I was put here during this time. I'm not a Russian agent. I'm not in Portugal. I'm not in Spain or whatever. I'm here and I like the country. I go outside and meet people. We talk, we do like
It's
normal.
first of all, it's shocking, Dave. I just
Yeah. So I like the place. I don't hate it. And then I would interact and I would be called names for saying that because I didn't wake up in the morning with this sort of visceral dislike of the country and then the people, and then people who disagree with me on certain cultural or social issues. I would say, okay, well, I can see your point and we'll move on. No, you're not moving on. Ooh, that's different. That feels different.
hmm
So when you say tipping point, I say yes, we have reached kind of a tipping point where a Tulsi Gabbard figure, somebody like her, if not her, somebody needs to come along. And Joe Biden isn't that person. Sorry, he's not. Kamala Harris certainly isn't that person. In fact, she's probably worse. What we need is a unifier, and we need somebody to come in and kind of calm things, but listen to those perspectives and not call people deplorable. Don't call people like unredeemable. Don't call people unusual Americans, although I kind of wore that with a badge of honor. I want to be hopeful that President Trump's legal process goes forward. I want to be hopeful there. But I got to tell you, with the grip like from the Comcasts of the world and the corporations and Wall Street, who apparently are really giddy because those military contracts are going to start coming in, and we basically it's bombs away when it comes to places like Venezuela, Bolivia, probably, and a few other places where we'll go and we'll do our little covert activities, and we'll send our drone.
Unfortunately, Syria will be back on the radar
Yeah.
again.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a big one because if you if you don't believe the narrative, you're obviously an Assad toady, if you remember that expression. So I
Now,
want to.
I wore that badge with honor for many a year, but I
Yeah,
think we took that back.
yeah. Well, there were like 3 or 4 reports that came out afterward that people just ignored, that there was no evidence of any chemical weapon discharge and so forth. But they, again, that they got their narrative done, so there was no need to circle back to take a look at any evidence of the contrary. Um, I want to be hopeful. That's all I can say. I'm not super optimistic because I just I've seen what they've done, what they did to Bernie Sanders, what they did to Tulsi Gabbard, what they're doing, and this is the weird thing that people don't see, that they're
Hmm.
doing what they did to Tulsi, they're doing to Trump. What they did to Tulsi, they did to Bernie Sanders. They did it this year and they did it in 2016. So, and again, the Republican Party is not a populist party in many places in the country. That's why you have Republican politicians right now who are just standing down. They're not commenting on this because they're thinking to themselves, well, maybe I can work with a Biden because Trump doesn't like my blue blood sort of fat cat, big donor class sort of,
They think they can go back and be supplicant. They
right.
want to just bounce back to business as usual.
Right. So Trump's got the problem that he had at the very beginning. He still has that problem. He's got a bunch of never Trumpers who are going to be quiet, and he's got the entire Democrat, machine running against him. And, and he's got a bunch of people who have been gaslit for 4 years that he's mean, he's angry, he's racist, he's all of these things that clearly, if you look at his history and all the things that he did in New York City with the Black community, it's garbage. It's complete, utter nonsense. When you have Jesse Jackson praising you and giving you awards when you were in New York City, you're barking up a tree that doesn't exist. So I defend President Trump. He's not perfect. He's not my ultimate candidate. My ultimate candidate was obviously destroyed in the Democratic primary. But I will fight to the end for President Trump because, as you mentioned, this is about election integrity. It's about our democracy. And if we can't count votes, then we really have no need for elections anymore.
That's right, Dave. And again, just appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about just what matters, right? It's our core values. And I'll tell you what, this is, not just COVID, not just election. We all have rallied and we have been coming together. And this is another hurdle. This is another obstacle, but we have friends and we have compatriots and we are strong people and we will get through it. Anyway, I appreciate you, brother, and thank you again.
Thanks for coming on, Caz, and keep me updated on that situation down in, or up in Georgia, I should say, from where my geographic location is.
You got it. Sounds good, Dave. Thank you.